The void was never silent, only forgotten. Beneath the skeletal husk of a dying cruiser, the stars wept faint light through fractured hull glass. The ship had no name anymore. It was a drifting grave, a coffin for a god who refused to die. Within its hollow corridors, Thanos stood alone, staring into the infinite black, as if he might see himself staring back. The air was stale with the scent of oxidized metal and burnt ozone. The hum of failing reactors pulsed like a weak heartbeat somewhere deep in the decks below. Every sound was distant, every thought heavy, and yet the warp whispered just beyond perception. He had traveled this far without the guided not by faith, but by the voice that lived inside his doubt. For months, he had watched reality thin around him, lights distorting, space folding upon itself like a dying lung. The stars flickered, and their reflections moved where the real ones stood still. It was beautiful, in the way all endings are. Once, he had wielded the infinity gauntlet. He had felt the breath of creation in his palm. Now, he felt only the cold weight of his own mind, heavier than any stone. Eternal and unfulfilled, he approached the viewport. Beyond it stretched the Eye of Terror, the warp's open wound. It churned like a storm of color and fire, clouds of unreality twisting around a black core that pulsed with impossible light. The Titan's expression did not change. There was no fear in him, only a scientist's precision, a pilgrim's hunger. He remembered the faces of those he had lost, the gods he had slain, and the endless balance he had once sought. But here, in this trembling corner of the galaxy, balance was a lie. The warp was chaos made flesh. It was emotion unbound, thought without form, the screaming echo of every soul that had ever existed. And he, eternal, logical Thanos, was drawn to it. A faint signal blinked on his console, distorted vox fragments tearing through the silence. Static carried the sound of chanting, distant and wrong, thousands of voices speaking with one will. The language was alien yet familiar, the sound of despair turned prayer. He tried to isolate the transmission, but the moment he touched the controls, the ship's lights dimmed. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the bulkhead, and his reflection in the glass began to smile. Though his lips did not move, he felt it before he heard it. A vibration beneath the skin, a pulse echoing through the marrow of the universe. The warp was not waiting. It was watching. Thanos closed his eyes and reached out. The warp light burned against his mind like the touch of a dying sun, but he did not turn away. "Show me," he whispered, though there was no air to carry his voice. The ship groaned in answer, metal screaming as its hull bent inward. Reality rippled, and through that impossible fracture, something ancient opened its gaze upon him. For a moment, he was nowhere, a speck suspended between stars and madness. Then came the voice, not heard but felt, 1,000 tongues speaking his name as if tasting it. Thanos. It did not sound like welcome. It sounded like recognition. He smiled once, faintly, as the light began to fade. "Finally," he said, "someone remembers. The ship's reactors died. The stars vanished, and the Titan fell forward into the wound of eternity." There was no falling. There was no direction in what came next. Gravity, distance, even time, all surrendered to the madness of the warp. Thanos drifted through it, body dissolving into shapes his mind could barely describe. The air, if it could be called that, smelled of burnt copper and sweet decay, a paradox made into perfume. Colors existed here that no mortal I had evolved to see. each shade carrying a taste, each sound possessing weight. The warp was alive, and it was curious. He saw the ghosts of galaxies drowning in its tides. Worlds swallowed by emotion made tangible. Planets of pure rage collided with oceans of sorrow. Armies marched in circles forever, screaming without sound, their banners rotting into veins of fire. A million faces turned toward him, human, Xenos, machine, and God, all asking the same unspoken question: why are you here? For the first time in millennia, Thanos did not have an answer. He remembered the balance he had sought, the quiet end he had promised creation. But those ideals withered in the face of this raw, endless sea of thought. The warp was not evil. It was truth, the unmasked soul of existence. Every law of nature here was written in madness and rewritten by will. He could feel it tasting his mind, probing, searching for what he feared. It found only resolve, and it laughed. From the depths of the shifting storm came laughter like tearing metal, each peal bending space. Shapes began to emerge, titanic silhouettes that moved like gods dreaming. One form towered above all, vast, crimson, and burning with fury. Its voice was not a sound, but a physical blow against the soul. Who dares walk uninvited through the blood god's realm? Thanos stood upon nothing and faced it. A seeker, he said. His voice was small against the void, but steady. A student of balance. The laughter deepened, now wet and eager. Balance. The figure boomed. There is only slaughter, Titan. Blood flows, skulls rise, and the universe remembers who was strongest. Another voice slithered through the storm, softer, crueler. Strength fades, it purred, echoing from a direction that did not exist. Pleasure endures. The warp shimmered, birthing 1,000 silver shapes, bodies shifting from one form to another. They reached for Thanos with hands of light and shadow, promising comfort, promising eternity without purpose. He stepped back, unyielding. I've known pleasure. I've known pain. Both serve the same end. 1,000 throats giggled like broken glass. Then you seek nothing, the voice replied. Nothingness is my sibling's gift. And then came the rot, a warmth that crawled beneath the skin. The air filled with the stench of soil and death, blooming with color too vibrant to be real. A garden unfurled before him, infinite and diseased, where flowers grew from bones and rivers of pus glimmered like gold. From the garden's heart, a jovial voice chuckled. Peace, my child. Come, rest your weary soul. You have done much killing, yes. You've earned a little decay. Thanos watched it all unfold, unblinking. He understood now that these beings were not deities in the way mortals imagined. They were emotions that had eaten themselves, ideas so vast they forgot their beginnings. They were reflections, pieces of him, amplified, unbound. He raised a hand and clenched it into a fist. The warp rippled. The storm paused, watching him. You are what remains when creation abandons discipline, he said quietly. You are chaos made flesh. And yet, he smiled faintly. You are beautiful. The laughter returned, softer this time. Then stay, Titan, whispered the countless voices of the warp. Let us show you what beauty truly means. The colors folded inward, and the gods began to circle him. In their gaze, he felt not hate, not love, only recognition, as if they had been waiting. He realized then that the warp did not lure him. It had summoned him. He was not an intruder here. He was an answer. The warp drew closer around him, a sea folding inward until it became a single thought. Thanos stood within it as one might stand within the mind of a sleeping god. Each breath he took pulled colors across the sky. Each heartbeat sent ripples through dimensions. His body, once flesh and matter, now flickered between realities, becoming an echo of himself, half titan, half idea. The voices were everywhere, no longer speaking from without, but whispering from within. He could feel them in the rhythm of his pulse, in the electric hum behind his eyes. Rage, lust, decay, deceit. They were no longer separate beings. They were organs of a single divine monstrosity, the soul of all life. He walked across what might have been a plane of glass, reflecting impossible stars. Every step produced images beneath his feet, memories he had buried. The death of his homeworld, the silence after his final victory, the universe restored yet unchanged. He had achieved his dream and found it hollow. That emptiness had drawn him here, to the only place where even gods felt doubt. Something vast shifted in the unseen distance. It was not one of the gods. It was older, deeper, a presence that predated them all. The warp itself had become aware of him, curious in the way a beast studies the tremor of a heartbeat before it feeds. Its voice filled every particle of existence. Balance, it said, and the word reverberated like a planet cracking. You speak of balance. Do you not see? We are balance. We are all that you have denied. Thanos closed his eyes, his expression calm. You are in balance, he replied. The fever that keeps creation alive, but never healed. The space around him convulsed. 1,000 images burst before him, angels burning, cities collapsing, stars dying like candles. The warp answered with visions, not words, showing him the truth he refused. It showed him that balance was not a state, but a cycle. Creation demanded destruction. Peace birthed stagnation. Order summoned rebellion. The universe was a pendulum, not a scale. He understood then what the warp wanted from him. Not worship, not surrender. It wanted recognition, validation from the only mind that could look upon it and see its purpose. It wanted to be understood. The warp's tide began to rise, each wave screaming with the echoes of the dead. Thanos did not resist. He stepped into it, letting the madness wash over him. For a heartbeat, he was everything, every death, scream, every prayer, every fleeting joy. He saw the Emperor upon the golden throne, his light flickering across galaxies. He saw worlds burn and be reborn. He saw chaos and order locked in an eternal embrace, neither able to win, neither willing to end. He whispered to the storm, "Then perhaps I was wrong." The sea of madness shuddered. Listening, "Perhaps balance is not a line to walk," he said. "Perhaps it is the space between two collapsing truths." The warp pulsed, not with anger, but approval. The gods fell silent, their laughter extinguished. For the first time since entering, Thanos felt peace. The colors dimmed. The laughter receded into memory. The warp's voice lingered one last time, soft as breath. "We have found each other." And then, silence. When Thanos opened his eyes, he stood once more within the hollow of his ship. The stars outside were unchanged, yet everything had shifted. He knew now that the warp was not a place to be conquered or escaped. It was within him, as it was within all things. The question was no longer whether he could survive it, but whether the universe could survive him. He turned away from the viewport, his reflection watching him with eyes that burned faintly red. Somewhere, far away, a new storm began to form. The ship drifted soundless across the scarlet currents, swallowed whole by the eye. Outside its dying hull, the warp churned and screamed, but inside there was only stillness. The machine spirits had long fled. Their final whispers burned into the fractured data slates like forgotten prayers. What remained was the faint pulse of the void engines, keeping the vessel alive the way a corpse might cling to a memory. Thanos sat in silence at the bridge, staring into the ocean of unreality that surrounded him. The warp shimmered against the glass like liquid light, constantly reshaping itself, 1,000 forms blooming and dying in an instant. He could almost hear them, thoughts that were not his own, bleeding into his mind like water seeping through cracks. The Chaos Gods were watching. He could feel their gaze pressing against his soul, not as malice, but as curiosity. He felt no fear. That emotion had burned out of him eons ago, replaced by the stillness of purpose. The warp had shown him fragments of truth, that balance was not a goal but an illusion, yet there was more. He sensed it, something beyond even these gods, something that whispered in the silence between their laughter. It was not content to let him wander unchallenged. It wanted to be known. The air thickened with scent, copper and ash as the bridge began to warp. Shadows elongated, melting across the floor until they coalesced into a single figure. It rose from the darkness like smoke forming into flesh, its presence both radiant and foul. A voice followed, smooth as silk but layered with infinite tones, each syllable breaking and reforming, as if 1,000 mouths spoke in unison. You trespass in the domains of divinity, Titan, why? Thanos rose, the massive shape of his armor catching the dim crimson light. To understand, he said, to see the architecture beneath chaos. The figure smiled, though its face was a swirl of shifting masks. Male, female, child, monster, all beautiful, all terrible. Understanding is change, it whispered, and change is mine. Did Tzeentch, the architect of fate, the god of lies and truth interwoven so tightly that no mind could separate them. The warp rippled with color as it spoke, reality bending around each word. Thanos regarded the being with the same analytical calm that had disarmed galaxies. You are not omniscient, he said. You are curiosity given form. The laughter that followed sounded like wind through broken glass. You see too clearly, child of dust. But tell me, what do you hope to build with your knowledge? A throne, a balance that will never exist. I seek no throne, Thanos replied. Only the reason behind existence, the equation that defines the struggle between order and chaos. The god tilted its head, its shape flickering into fractal spirals. There is no equation, only recursion. The question creates itself. You ask because you are meant to ask, and the asking is the answer. The Titan's brow furrowed slightly. A paradox, a truth, Tzeentch replied. You stand at the edge of infinite becoming. You will either dissolve or ascend. There is no middle. The warp around them pulsed, each heartbeat birthing entire worlds of color and vanishing them again. Thanos felt the weight of eternity pressing against his will, demanding surrender. Yet he stood unmoved. Then I will walk the edge, he said. The laughter quieted. The gods studied him, not as prey, but as potential. So be it, seeker of impossible truths. You may walk, but know this, each step you take will rewrite you, until one day you will not remember whether you came seeking understanding or whether we sent you to find it. The figure dissolved into light. The ship trembled, its walls bleeding golden liquid that shimmered like molten time. The warp outside flared, and a choir of unseen voices began to sing, a hymn of madness that vibrated through the bones of the vessel. Thanos listened. Every note was a thought, every harmony a fragment of purpose. The song was not for him, and yet it carried his name. He closed his eyes, and the melody carved itself into his soul. The first of the Chaos Gods had spoken. 3 remained. The hymn lingered long after the light of the architect faded. Each note thrummed through the ship's metal bones like a pulse, as if the very structure of the vessel had begun to dream. Shadows bent toward Thanos as he walked the corridor, drawn to the gravity of his thought. He could feel the song buried beneath the hum of the engines and echo that refused to die. Every verse repeated his purpose, twisting it slightly each time until even he was uncertain whether he still walked of his own will. He entered the observatory, its glass canopy fractured and half devoured by water. Outside, the sea of unreality shifted hue, the colors deepening into crimson. He sensed the next presence before the first droplet of blood struck the deck. It fell from nowhere, warm and thick, hissing as it touched the metal. Another drop followed, then another, until the air grew heavy with the scent of iron and the rhythmic thud of something vast approaching. The warp convulsed. Out of its molten sky stepped a mountain of flesh and brass. Khorne, the blood god, towered above the Titan like an executioner carved from rage itself. His voice was a roar that split dimensions. "You speak of understanding," the god thundered. "Understanding is weakness. Only battle proves truth." Thanos faced him, unarmed, his voice steady. "Battle creates nothing. It ends." The giant's laughter shook the stars. "Endings are creation. From the death of one, strength is born in another. The universe bleeds, and I drink." The words crashed through the warp, stirring rivers of molten scarlet around them. Thanos felt the heat of it against his skin, the invitation to surrender, to revel in the purity of destruction. He had known this path once, the simplicity of violence, the logic of finality. Yet here, beneath this god's shadow, it felt small, almost human. "I have slain more than you can count," he said quietly, "and yet I am empty." Khorne leaned forward, his fanged grin the size of a cathedral. "Then fill yourself. Kill the architect's lies. Tear down the weaver's whispers. Let rage be your scripture." Thanos' eyes narrowed. "Rage without thought is dust in the wind. You are the consequence of every mind that sought to control. You are their rebellion, not their salvation." For the first time, the blood god hesitated. A low growl rolled through the warp, less anger than amusement. "Perhaps," he said, "and yet the galaxy moves by my hand. Without war, your precious balance would rot." The Titan felt the truth in it, bitter and undeniable. War was the heartbeat of existence. Peace was merely its silence. But he also sensed the trap. To accept this truth was to belong to it. "I will not bow," he said simply. Khorne's laughter returned, deeper now, pleased. "Then you are not prey." The god straightened, his outline already dissolving into the crimson haze. "But remember, Titan, every truth you find must be bought in blood." The storm withdrew, leaving behind only silence and the steady drip of blood upon the deck. Thanos looked down. The droplets formed a pattern, his name, written in veins of light that faded as he watched. He understood that this was not temptation. It was recognition. The gods saw in him a reflection of themselves, curiosity, wrath, pride. Each encounter carved another facet of his own soul. Beyond the viewport, the red glare dimmed, replaced by a faint, sickly glow, the promise of decay. Another presence stirred in the endless dark, patient and smiling. The choir's song changed key, slower now, softer, filled with warmth that smelled of rot and soil. It sounded almost like comfort. Thanos turned toward it, knowing the third voice had begun to sing. The light dimmed to the color of dying embers, and the smell of soil thickened, heavy with the sweetness of rot. It crept through the corridors, curling along the walls like breath. Thanos followed it, his footfalls echoing down hallways that no longer belonged to the ship. The air had become damp, almost tender, as if the warp itself inhaled and exhaled with him. With each step, metal softened into flesh. The walls glistened with sap and blood. Flowers of impossible hue blossomed from rivets, pulsing as though each petal had a heartbeat. At the end of the corridor waited a door that had not been there before, a vast arch of bone crowned with symbols that writhed beneath his gaze. He pressed his hand to it, and the bone shuddered, parting with a sigh. Beyond lay a garden that stretched into infinity, its soil a tapestry of faces. Every blade of grass was a whisper, every tree a memory. The air shimmered with a false serenity that felt like the calm between heartbeats. From the garden's heart came laughter deep, warm, and ancient. "Ah, visitor," said the voice, carrying a weight of joy too heavy to bear. "You walk with such purpose, and yet you smell of exhaustion. Come, rest. There is no need to fight the end." Thanos stepped forward. "I did not come to rest," he said. The garden rippled. From beneath a mound of blossoms rose the figure of Grandfather Nurgle, vast and smiling, his bulk spilling over like a mountain of life and death entwined. His skin gleamed with the sheen of dew and decay. His eyes were suns of dim green light. He smelled of autumn and graveyards, of rain that feeds the worms. Then why come at all? The god asked. "What is left to understand, Titan? You have seen war and desire, and now you stand before peace. My peace." Thanos looked upon the endless garden, the hum of insects that were not insects, the gentle sighs of souls too tired to resist. "This is not peace," he said. "This is surrender painted kind." Nurgle's smile deepened. "All things surrender, my child. Even stars, even gods. Life must learn to accept its rot." "I do not accept." The laughter was not cruel. It was paternal, forgiving. "You will. All creatures that seek meaning return to me. They decay into comprehension." Thanos felt the air thicken, pressing against his lungs, urging him to breathe deeply, to let go. The garden's warmth caressed him, and for a moment, he felt the ache in his bones soften, the eternal tension of purpose easing. He could almost believe the lie that in this decay lay peace, that his endless hunger could be buried here among the roots. But then he heard it. Beneath the sweetness, a faint echo of the warp's first voice, the storm behind the lullaby. It whispered a single truth, that this peace was only another mask. The garden was not contentment. It was containment. He stepped back, breaking the illusion's grasp. "You speak of cycles," he said, his voice low. "But I have seen the cycle's flaw. It ends where it begins, with you feeding on the living and the dying alike." The god's smile faded, only slightly. Without decay, there is no renewal. And without corruption, Thanos said, there might be understanding. The warp trembled, the flowers withering, the soil sighing as if disappointed. Nurgle regarded him with something close to pity. Then go, child of ruin. You are too proud to rest, too wise to worship. But remember, every step you take from here is decay denied, and decay denied is life starved. Thanos turned, the garden folding in upon itself as he walked. The warmth became cold. The scent of rot gave way to ozone. He passed through the arch once more, and the ship's steel walls reformed around him, scarred and trembling. The choir outside changed again, the harmonies dissonant, cruelly sweet. He could feel one last god waiting in the dark, a whisper hidden within pleasure and pain alike. The air around him tasted of honey and ash. He realized that the final voice was already inside him, waiting to be acknowledged. And with that understanding, the Titan stepped forward to meet Slaanesh. The moment Thanos crossed the threshold, the air changed. It was neither cold nor warm, but alive, pulsing with sensation, thick with memory. The walls of the ship had melted into light, the metal flowing like glass beneath a violet sky that had no horizon. Every surface shimmered with impossible texture. It was beauty and horror entwined, pleasure carved from suffering. In the distance, a symphony rose and fell, voices weeping in ecstasy. Instruments made from living throats, a song so perfect it hurt to listen. He felt it before he saw it, a presence coiling through the warp like silk through fire. The air tasted of desire and dust, of every longing that had ever driven creation. When the figure appeared, it was neither male nor female, angel nor demon, but all of them, shifting, graceful, infinite. Every breath it took seemed to alter reality itself, bending form and meaning until the mind bled trying to comprehend. "Welcome, Titan," said the voice, sweet and terrible. "You have walked through knowledge, through war, through decay. You must be weary. Tell me, have you found what you seek?" Thanos stood still, his gaze unflinching. "No, each god I've met is but an echo, a reflection of emotion without discipline. They feed on creation but do not create." The figure smiled, its lips painted in starlight. "And yet you came. You entered the warp not to destroy, but to feel. Even now, your mind trembles at what it cannot deny. You crave meaning, but meaning is sensation. I am the truth that your logic fears." The air quivered. Around him, visions bloomed, memories he had buried, the laughter of Gamora, the moment before her death, the stillness that followed. Her voice whispered his name, tender and cruel. "Did you love me?" It asked. Thanos' jaw tightened. "Love is weakness." "No," the voice said, soft as silk. "Love is the only strength that ever mattered." He turned away, but the illusion followed. Each step birthed another vision, those he had slain returning to him, their faces merging with his own. The more he looked, the more the line between guilt and desire blurred. He reached for the gauntlet that was no longer there, only to find his hand trembling, naked, powerless. Slaanesh laughed, the sound echoing like silver bells across a battlefield. "You are perfect," it whispered. "A being who kills to feel alive. A soul that cannot stop seeking its own reflection. You belong to me, Titan." He met its gaze, eyes burning gold. "I belong to nothing." The god approached, each step a ripple through existence. "Then you belong to everything. It touched his chest, and reality split open. He saw universes collapsing, souls melting into one another, life feeding upon itself in a spiral of eternal hunger. For a moment, he saw himself seated upon a throne of glass, surrounded by infinite versions of his own face, all smiling, all worshipping. It was beautiful, it was unbearable, and it was almost true. The Titan tore himself free. "You mistake curiosity for devotion," he said, his voice shaking the void. "I came to understand you, not to kneel." The smile that answered him was patient. "And understanding is the first step to worship. You may resist Thanos, but the warp does not forget its pilgrims." The world around them shifted. The violet sky darkened to crimson, the music turning dissonant. Slaanesh's form began to dissolve into shadow, retreating into the folds of reality, leaving only its whisper. "The final god awaits, Seeker. The one even we fear to name. He will show you what balance truly means." Thanos stood alone again, the echoes fading into static silence. The ship's walls reformed, cracked and bleeding light. The stars outside flickered, as though watching him. He realized that the journey had changed him, not corrupted, not purified, but stretched. The warp was no longer around him. It was within him. He looked toward the churning void, where the last voice waited beyond perception, patient and vast. The one who did not need to speak, for his message was silence itself. The one the others called the hidden god. The silence after Slaanesh's laughter felt heavier than sound. It pressed against the hull, a weight that had no shape yet filled every corner of the ship. Outside, the warp's light dimmed to bruised violet, and the galaxies beyond it flickered like dying embers trapped in glass. Thanos stood at the bridge, staring into that twilight sea. He knew there was still one presence left, one he had not yet met, one that the others spoke of with unease. It was not a god in the same way they were. It did not revel in being seen or adored. It was the thought that crept in when even chaos grew quiet. He closed his eyes and breathed. The air inside the ship had gone still, as if the warp itself were holding its breath. The metallic temps of blood and ozone lingered, but beneath it came another scent-cold stone, dust, the smell of absence. When he opened his eyes again, the stars had vanished. In their place stretched an endless plain of ash. The ship was gone. He stood barefoot on a surface that felt like the memory of Earth, the soil disintegrating beneath his steps. There was no sound, only the faint hum of thought. Then a voice not round him, not within him, but through him spoke. "You have seen them all," it said. "Desire, rage, decay, change. And yet you persist. Why?" Thanos looked into the emptiness and found no form, no light. "Because they are reflections," he answered. "Each claims dominion over truth, yet all are fragments of a greater design. I seek that design." The voice replied, calm and unadorned. "You seek meaning in what was never meant to have it. Even gods must end. What you call balance is only the pause between two annihilations." The ground trembled. From beneath the ash rose pillars of bone, stretching into infinity. Upon them hung the remnants of countless realities, broken thrones, shattered worlds, skeletons of suns. Thanos felt the enormity of it fill his chest like grief. "You are entropy," he said. A pause. "I am conclusion." The words reverberated through him, stripping away every illusion the warp had offered. He saw the pattern now. Not a cycle, not a war, but a collapse. The warp and the material were not opposites. They were stages of the same decay. Creation was only the first symptom. "Why show me this?" he asked, though the voice softened, almost kind. "Because you are like us, but smaller. You believe balance can save you. It cannot. Balance is a word the dying use to comfort themselves. Only acceptance brings peace." He clenched his fists. "Peace is a lie whispered by those too weak to continue." "Then continue," the voice said. "Build, destroy. It changes nothing." The ash rose in a spiral around him, forming shapes his own face, multiplied 1,000 times, each one whispering his name. He could feel the pressure of inevitability closing in, the certainty that all things end. Yet deep within that dread, there was a spark defiance. Stubborn and alive. "If all must end," he said, "then let it end knowing it was understood." The ash storm paused, the air tightening as if the universe itself hesitated. "That," the voice said slowly, "is why we fear you." And then it was gone. Thanos fell to his knees, surrounded by the echoes of that final truth. The ash beneath him turned to glass, and within it, he saw reflections of every god he had faced. Rage, desire, rot, change, each now silent, watching him. Their forms wavered, bowing not in submission, but in recognition. The Titan bowed his head, not in worship, but in comprehension. The gods were not masters of the warp. They were symptoms, and he, flawed, finite, relentless, was the disease that sought to cure them. The glass cracked, and beneath it, light began to stir, golden and faint, like dawn through smoke. It whispered of something beyond chaos, beyond death itself. He rose, turning toward the glow. "Then I will walk until even you fall silent." The light answered not in words, but in warmth, and the warp began to tremble. The faint glow that had seeped through the glass thickened until it seemed to breathe. It spread through the air like dawn, struggling to be born, touching the endless grey plain with streaks of ochre and gold. Thanos stood at its center, his vast frame diminished against the scope of the horizon, yet unbowed. The light was not of the warp. It pulsed with a rhythm that felt ordered, deliberate, something remembered from the world of matter. It smelled of ozone and dust, the scent of worlds being forged. The contrast hurt his eyes. He had spent too long in the heart of madness, and structure now felt like pain. He walked toward it. With every step, fragments of what had been the warp peeled away. The air thickened, becoming heavy as oil. Shapes rose from the plain, half-formed statues of beings he almost recognized, custodians in broken armor. Angels of the Mechanicum, saints turned to glass. Their faces were serene, yet in their stillness he saw terror. They were memories of faith, fossilized by time, the residues of every mind that had sought to cage infinity within a prayer. As he passed, their eyes followed him, not accusing, not pleading, merely remembering. The light gathered ahead into a single column. Inside it stood a figure of pure luminance, no more than a silhouette cut into radiance. It did not speak. The warp around them grew still, waiting, afraid. Thanos knew this was not one of the four, nor the whisper that had spoken in ash. This was the echo of what the warp feared, the fragment of discipline that even chaos could not devour. Some might have called it the Emperor's shadow, others the last dream of order. To him it was a question made flesh. He stepped closer until the light burned the edges of his vision. "If you are real," he said, his voice low, "then you are the balance I sought. But you hide here, in silence, while the galaxy screams. The light flared. For a heartbeat, he saw faces within it, millions, overlapping, all whispering the same word without sound. Endure. Thanos bared his teeth. Endure, that is not balance. That is stagnation wrapped in holiness. He raised a hand as though to touch the light, and the heat scorched his palm, peeling the skin to ash. Yet he did not withdraw. I have seen your work, he said. Empires raised upon sacrifice. Faith built on fear. You are no different from the gods of the war, only quieter in your cruelty. The light trembled, then contracted into a sphere that hovered before him. It pulsed once, and a voice that was not a voice filled the silence. Then be better. Pain lanced through him. Every memory he carried erupted at once, the weight of every decision, every death, every justification. The burden of a universe that had learned to call murder mercy. He fell to one knee, the ground cracking beneath him. The sphere drifted nearer, and its glow touched his brow. Images flooded his mind, worlds where balance had been achieved, only to collapse again. Galaxies born from the ashes of others. The pattern repeated, endless, inevitable. He saw that balance was not peace, but persistence, the will to begin again despite knowing the end. The light withdrew, leaving only the afterimage of understanding. He rose slowly, his voice hoarse. Persistence, then. That is the answer. The sphere dimmed, its last whisper curling through the air like a benediction, and that is why you will never die. When the brightness faded, the plane was gone. He stood once more upon the bridge of his ship, stars returning in their cold silence. The warp no longer screamed. It listened. Thanos gazed into it, and the reflection that stared back was neither god nor mortal, but something balanced on the edge of both. His armor flickered, colors shifting between gold and crimson, between order and ruin. For the first time, he felt the universe breathing with him, not as master, not as servant, but as mirror. He turned from the viewport. The engines stirred to life on their own, guided by no hand. Ahead lay the unending dark, and within it a path only he could walk. The Titan of balance, the disciple of madness, now carried both within his chest. He whispered to the silence, "Let us see which breaks first." The ship moved forward, vanishing into the trembling stars. The void accepted the vessel like a wound that had learned to close. The warp's roar subsided into stillness, its endless choir now a hum beneath the pulse of the ship. Thanos stood at the viewport, the faint light of distant suns brushing the edges of his armor. He had seen gods born from rage, pleasure, decay, and deceit. He had listened to the whisper of entropy and the quiet challenge of light. Now there was only the aftermath, the silence that followed revelation. For the first time in his long existence, he felt neither triumph nor despair. He felt clarity. The warp had not given him purpose. It had stripped away the illusion that he ever needed one. Purpose was a chain disguised as meaning, forged by beings too fragile to face infinity. The truth was simpler. Existence persisted because it must. Everything else, disorder, chaos, morality, sin, were shadows cast by that single necessity. The ship drifted near the edge of the eye, the colors of unreality bleeding into the black sea of real space. There, where both realms touched, hung something vast and ancient, a throne sculpted of lightless stone, suspended between dimensions. It radiated no energy, no presence, and yet Thanos knew it watched him. The throne of silence. No record named it, No scripture dared to. It was said to be the grave of a god that had chosen to stop speaking. He left the bridge and walked through corridors that reshaped themselves around him. The ship obeyed no physics now. It was a vessel of will, and his will was all that kept it coherent. Each step echoed like a drumbeat through eternity. When he reached the docking bay, the air shimmered, folding inward to form a stairway of black glass that extended from the ship to the waiting throne. He descended without hesitation. The surface beneath his feet was neither cold nor warm. It simply was. The throne loomed above him, carved from the absence of light, its edges rippling as if unsure whether to exist. He stopped at its base and spoke, his voice low. "I have walked through your kingdom. I have seen what you left behind." No answer came, only the faint vibration of the void itself. He waited. A flicker passed across the darkness, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw a figure seated upon the frontal, robed in shadow, a face both human and not. It looked down at him, and in its gaze he felt neither judgment nor mercy, only recognition, the same wordless understanding that the warp had offered, but purer, stripped of hunger. It was not a god. It was what remained when even gods ceased to believe in themselves. "You sought balance," the voice said, soft enough to be imagined. "You found silence. Is that enough?" Thanos met its gaze. "Silence is not peace," he said, "but it is honest." The figure inclined its head. "Honesty is a beginning." The void quivered. Images rippled through the dark worlds consumed, heroes forgotten, galaxies flickering out like dying candles. The throne showed him what eternity truly meant, a procession of endings that no one would ever witness. Yet amidst it all, there was beauty, the faint glow of a sun being born, the laughter of a child on a world no one would remember. It was fragile, transient, and perfect. The voice spoke again. "Do you see now? Balance is not a law. It is a mercy. Without it, existence would drown in its own reflection." Thanos knelt, not in reverence, but in acknowledgement. "Then mercy is what sustains the lie." "Perhaps," the voice said, "but it is a lie worth keeping." The throne began to dissolve, scattering into motes of shadow that drifted upward like embers. The figure remained for a moment longer, then faded, its final whisper stretching through the void. "You will carry the silence with you. Titan, wherever you walk, creation will remember." He rose slowly, the echoes of that promise lingering in the air. Above him, the void stirred, the boundary between reality and the warp blurring once more. He felt the call of both realms pulling at him, demanding choice. But Thanos did not believe in choices anymore. The last fragments of the throne scattered like dust into the vacuum, vanishing before they could settle. Thanos stood alone on the bridge of darkness that linked his ship to nothingness. Behind him, the vessel trembled as the void itself began to reshape, warp light bleeding through fractures in the firmament. Ahead, only the residue of what had once been a god lingered, our pulse of absence, the echo of a question that could no longer be answered. He turned his gaze toward the eye. It had changed. Where once it churned with fire and color, it now shimmered with faint light, as though it had learned something from him. The tides of madness still raged within, but a strange order moved through them, the rhythm of a heart too vast to comprehend. He understood that the warp would never be tamed, yet it could remember. It remembered him. He breathed, and the air hummed with low resonance, as though the galaxy itself exhaled through him. In that moment, he realized how small the line between creation and thought had become. The barrier that separated God from mortal, matter from idea, had thinned. If he wished, he could step into the warp and never return. If he wished, he could command it to close, to end. Both choices would lead to the same silence. He laughed once, a sound without humor. So this is what remains after gods and monsters. The ship did not answer. It simply adjusted its course, drawn toward the faint light at the eye's edge. Through the viewport, he watched galaxies spin like motes of dust. He thought of the faces that had driven him here, his daughters, his enemies, every soul he had condemned in pursuit of a dream. Their names drifted through his mind like a litany of ghosts. He did not grieve them, but neither could he forget. A tremor passed through the vessel. The sensors flickered to life, displaying signals from the Imperium's border, distant transmissions. The chants of astropaths, the endless hum of the human voices reciting faith into the dark. For the Emperor, they murmured, countless and desperate. Their belief, a thin golden thread, stretched across oblivion. Thanos listened, and something within him stirred. Not pity, not pridely recognition. He had met their Emperor in shadow and silence. He knew now that even gods built from faith were prisoners of their followers' need to believe. And yet, in that frail need, he found something almost divine. Persistence. The same persistence that refused to let the stars die quietly. He whispered to the coms, though there was no transmission to carry his words. Keep your light, children of terror. The dark remembers your courage. The ship glided forward, the hull glowing faintly with energy drawn from no known source. Through the warp's veil, Thanos saw shapes watching him vast. Spectral outlines of the Chaos Gods, silent now, their laughter gone. They did not challenge him. They only observed, as if waiting to see what he would become. For the first time, he understood their silence not as defeat, but as respect. He reached toward the console, fingers brushing the control runes, and for a heartbeat the universe seemed to pause. Every atom held its breath. Every star hesitated. In that stillness, he spoke not to the gods, not to creation, but to the balance itself. You are neither curse nor blessing, he said. You are the reason eternity endures. The moment passed. The hum returned. The ship's engines awakened with a deep, resonant thrum. He turned his back on the eye and set his course for the void beyond known space. No maps marked that region. No prayers reached it. It was the true silence, unclaimed and infinite. As the ship moved, the warp folded around it one last time. From its depths came a whisper, familiar, ancient, and amused. Balance found you, Titan. Thanos smiled, not as conqueror or pilgrim, but as something in between. And I found it wanting. The light of the eye faded behind him. Ahead lay nothing but darkness. He stepped into it willingly, carrying both chaos and order within him. The quiet heartbeat of a universe that could not decide whether to end or begin. The stars grew thinner as he traveled. Beyond the borders of the Eye and the Imperium, there was only the ink of eternity and the faint echo of his engines. Time folded upon itself. Days and years became the same slow breath. Within that endless drift, Thanos ceased to count distance. He sat upon the bridge in silence, the warp no longer a storm but a mirror, reflecting every fragment of what he had become. He remembered how it had begun, the dream of balance, the promise that death could bring peace. He had thought himself a surgeon cutting rot from creation, yet all along he had been the wound refusing to heal. The warp had shown him this. It had stripped him until nothing was left but thought. And then even thought had burned away, leaving clarity raw as bone. Outside the viewport, a nebula stirred thin light spilling from the carcass of a dying star. He steered the ship closer. Its surface flared with pale flame, whispering gases forming patterns that shifted like language. The sound of it seeped through the hull, a murmur that might have been wind or prayer. He knew better now than to ask which. Everything was both. Everything was neither. He reached out, palm resting against the glass, and for an instant his reflection stared back, a face carved by centuries of purpose, softened by the faintest trace of wonder. The light of the star painted him in gold, as if mocking the sanctity of gods. He spoke to no one. "You were right," he said quietly. "Persistence is the only truth." The star pulsed once, as though answering. Its final eruption washed across the void, bathing the ship in white fire. The consoles dimmed. The engine stuttered, then steadied again, pulling energy from the wave itself. In that radiance, the Titan understood that he had become the thing he sought to comprehend. Not a god, not a mortal, but the perpetual motion between the two. Balance not as peace, but as tension eternal. He turned from the dying star and walked through the corridor one last time. The walls shimmered with residual light, the metal breathing faintly under his touch. At the airlock, he paused, the void beyond, vast and silent. He could step out and let the warp claim him, dissolve into its dreaming heart and become myth. Or he could continue onward, carrying the silence to places that had never known it. Neither choice frightened him. He opened the hatch. The universe poured in cold, unending, perfect. For a heartbeat he simply stood there, feeling the weight of it settle upon him. Then he smiled, a small, tired curve of the lips that no one would ever see. "I understand now," he whispered. "You were never testing me. You were waiting to be seen." The words vanished into vacuum. The ship turned, slow and deliberate, away from the fading light of the eye. Its course bent toward the uncharted gulf beyond the galactic rim, where no beacon reached and no god's whisper could follow. The stars ahead were newborn, trembling in the dark. Unaware of the stories written before their birth, he walked back to the bridge and sat, hands folded, eyes fixed upon the horizon. The engine's hum merged with the rhythm of his pulse. Every sound became the same note, the hymn of persistence, the melody of existence refusing to die. Behind him, the eye of terror closed, its colors dimming into a scar too small for the universe to notice. Within it, the Chaos Gods watched in silence, and for the first time since creation began, they did not speak. They listened. Thanos, the Seeker, the Destroyer, the Balance, drifted onward through the night. No destiny awaited him, no prophecy, no throne. Only the quiet promise of endurance, and the endless work of understanding. The darkness swallowed his ship, and the galaxy forgot his name. But somewhere, in the soft vibration between one heartbeat and the next, a whisper lingered, neither prayer nor curse, only truth. There is no balance without the will to seek it, and so the universe kept breathing,